like to inform what this session is all about. This session talks about regional integration and energy cooperation. Success through synergy is what we are planning to achieve and discuss in this session. We also have remarks by Her Excellency Ms. Alina, U.S. Ambassador to Nepal. We also have a release of a report on regional investment frameworks and guidelines. But Director SAARC IRAD. Okay. We'd like to invite our panelists, Dasto Sonom P. Wangdi, Director General, Department of Hydropower and Power System, Bhutan, Professor Dr. Muhammad Tamim from Bangladesh, Mr. Deepak Amitabh, Chairman and Managing Director, PTC India Limited, and Mr. Michael Satin, Director, USAID. We'd also like to request Her Excellency Ms. Alina to kindly join us on stage. She is the US Ambassador to Nepal. And again, I'd like to inform all our distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and our moderator that we only have an hour to finish this panel. So I think we'll begin the session with remarks from Her Excellency. So I'd like to request Her Excellency for her remarks in this session.
Thank you and good afternoon. I realize we stand between everybody and lunch. Never a great place to be, but I think we're going to have a very interesting conversation. So I'm pleased to be here with the distinguished panelists, to be speaking with all of you. Namaste. Good afternoon. I think that a conversation on regional integration and energy cooperation is a critical part of the discussion about regional prosperity. At the base level, we need to power our businesses, our homes, and our schools. But energy can also be a catalyst for deeper regional integration. And energy security, I think, as we all know, is a critical issue for the entire South Asian region. South Asia is home to nearly 1/4 of the world's population. And the economies in this region are growing rapidly, by an average of nearly 7% each year. But South Asia's gross domestic product per capita is less than 1/3 of the global average. And per capita energy consumption in South Asia is far below the global average, 580 kilowatt hours compared to 3,000 kilowatt hours. That means South Asians consume about 75% less energy than the global average, hinting at unmet need in spite of rapid change on several fronts: the increasing economic growth, the industrialization, an increasing population, and accelerating urbanization. All of these changes increase the demand for electricity. Taken together, they represent a critical and fundamental challenge to human development in the region. South Asian decision makers are working to address the challenge of rising electricity demand and are increasingly looking at opportunities to cooperate across borders in search for answers. And in recent years, several positive developments have underlined the region's commitment to energy cooperation. These include the 2014 SAARC Framework Agreement on Energy Cooperation and the 2014 Power Trade Agreement between India and Nepal. In recent years, bilateral frameworks between India and Bangladesh, as well as India and Bhutan, have also strengthened to accelerate regional power trade. Currently, around 2,300 megawatts of power are traded in this BBIN subregion. Existing power trade in the region has demonstrated win-win benefits for all South Asian countries and provides a strong foundation for accelerating regional hydropower trade. For example, Bhutan's hydropower development improved its domestic electricity supply and its national income. Bhutan's surplus hydropower exports to India account for 25% of its GDP. In another example, Bangladesh began importing 500 megawatts of power from India in 2013. This energy boost helped Bangladesh reduce load shedding by 70% and generates an annual savings of around $500 million. India also gains by earning revenue from electricity exports to its neighbor. Regional integration and energy cooperation can yield big benefits, but don't just take my word for it. A A 2015 World Bank study found that regional electricity cooperation in South Asia could lead to savings of $19 billion per year over the next 25 years. A 2017 study by the USAID-funded South Asia Regional Initiative for Energy Integration, or SAARC, showed that accelerated power trade between India and Nepal could increase Nepal's gross domestic product by over $120 billion in the next 30 years. Without this energy trade, that growth rate will be 39% lower. Another SAARC study found that Bangladesh could save 30% in energy costs by importing electricity from India instead of using imported fuels to power domestic electricity production. All of these studies and recent actions clearly show how extending and expanding cross-border electricity trade in South Asia will benefit everyone, providing the basis for greater economic growth and development. This is the definition of win-win. Energy cooperation is therefore not just about increasing integration, but also about building regional prosperity. The U.S. government actively supports regional energy integration. We're committed to fostering connections from Central Asia to Southeast Asia and everywhere in between through increased physical infrastructure, coordinated regulatory and trade institutions, and human and digital connectivity. Regional integration is not just good for South Asia. We believe it's good for the world, including the United States. And we want to see a more stable, prosperous, and integrated South Asia. This outcome is more likely when the countries of the region are linked together through trade agreements and have greater physical infrastructure connections. Recognizing the vast economic potential of electricity connectivity, the U.S. government has been working to foster these connections through physical infrastructure, regulatory trade architecture, and strengthen human and institutional capacity. Our activities include technical training on power contracts, procurement, regulation, and electricity system modeling, as well as that physical infrastructure, such as the planned 300 kilometers of electricity transmission lines and our new Millennium Challenge Corporation Compact with Nepal. We also know, however, that it's going to take time and human energy to build up regional energy cooperation. International experience has shown that most cross-border power trade begins with bilateral interactions. These two-country arrangements provide a foundation for multilateral arrangements and transactions. South Asia is moving along this path. The next step is to coordinate regional energy regulations and policies. This means building strong and effective regulatory regimes, designing competitive market pricing mechanisms, developing solid contracts and agreements, and setting up dispute resolution mechanisms, as well as supporting a technical regional coordination agency that can facilitate regional planning and development. These next steps require some work, but promise major benefit. Regional integration and energy cooperation pave the way for increased business opportunities and a more stable, prosperous region. This issue before you is one that can truly empower South Asia and catalyze the region's development and prosperity, if you'll pardon the pun. I look forward to hearing more from our panelists on how this potential can become a reality. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I would now like to request Your Excellency for a release of a report on regional investment framework and guidelines, and let me get the report.
So, I just want to say a few words on that only. As power sector is very capital intensive and long gestation period, investment is a concern. With that perspective, we have taken up a study under USAID SAARC program to review the policies prevailing in each South Asian country, which covers FDI policies, incentives for investors, land acquisition policies, so many, we have in dispute settlement also, and we have also drawn the international experience, and based on that we have come out with a suggested framework for investment and guidelines. to promote investment in the South Asia region also.
Very good. So we can all stand up.
This is a report on regional investment framework and guidelines by South Asia Regional Initiative and Energy. I think we have copies available for all our distinguished guests and participants to please make sure that you take your copy with you to know more on the investment framework and guidelines. Thank you, Your Excellency, and thank you to all our panelists for doing the honors. And I think now I would like to hand over the session to Mr. Anil Chitrakar, who has a really tough job on finishing the session in the next 45 minutes.
So we had a good practice round in the ante-room, so we should be able to do this, quite efficiently. But the point, about this session is to basically say, in the morning, the context was that energy, could be the lead sector that would, start, basically integrating the region, getting us to prosperity, but then it's an easy, tool to integrate. So the message that we really want to get through, in this session is to basically say what is happening. So there are things that are already happening, so which we should basically build on. But secondly, let's not be romantic and just go for rhetorics, but there are some real challenges, that we need to address. And then the third part, of course, is what role does business play in basically facilitating a conversation with the political sector, with economics, with other sectors, so that this actually becomes a reality. And so, if you look at the program sheet, I just want to start by saying, the organizers, when they wrote the little blurb, for this session, it says, the energy sector could play a key role. Now, could play a key role is not very proactive. And so, let's say we had our next meeting in a year's time, and if the sentence started by saying the energy sector is playing a key role, then what would we have done in the next, say 12 months to actually be able to change that language from could be playing to is playing? So Michael, do you want to take a crack at it first? So you said, you were not happy with the word could play. So what will it take us, to go into is playing?
I'll give it a first try, and then I'll pass it on quickly. Let me make my comments very, very short, and I'll make some longer comments later. Could play and is playing. Let me just make one thing clear. I'm not contesting the fact that it is a piece of regional economic integration, and that it is an important piece of economic growth and development in each of the member nations in SAARC. My contest is that not only could it play, but it must play and it will play. And without it, it is a necessary condition. Without it, we won't see us arrive at full integration and full economic growth and development. That's simply the comment I was making to you back in the other room, that it's not just a could, it's a must.
Okay. So on that note, so now, yeah, please.
I will be making a theme context because SAARC program we have been doing for the last 4 years on energy cooperation. See, without energy cooperation and adequate supply of electricity, I don't think that really economic growth is possible, as well as we can grow industry also. So with that context, let me make a small brief presentation. I know the time is very short also. On the overview of South Asia, the total installed capacity of South Asia presently is about 383 gigawatt, and India's capacity is about 334 gigawatt, about 88%. This the fourth in the world. This huge capacity is fourth in the world only. The Afghanistan, Bhutan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, they are small power systems. And whereas the Bangladesh and the Pakistan, they are mid-sized power systems. And India is a large power system, of course. And if you look at the energy resources in South Asia, we have got very diverse energy resources, coal, hydro, renewable, and particularly the hydro, I think is huge hydro potential is there, only 350 gigawatt, and we have been able to develop only 15%. I think that can be discussed. If we look at the per capita consumption, which is one of the important, I think, for the standard of living, for the South Asia region, is hardly 576 per kWh per capita. It is, if you compare it with world any developed economy, I think it is very less. The world average is about 3,000, whereas the US economy is, the per capita consumption is 13,000. So I think this is one of, they are the key drivers. The energy and peak shortages, low per capita consumption, poor accessibility also, hardly 76%, 70, less than 80% today we have got the accessibility, except in Bhutan, I think there's more. Resource crunch in Bangladesh, the gas is now depleting there only, optimal utilization of resources, economic benefits. So these are all the key drivers basically for promoting the cross-border trade. Presently, about 2,300 megawatt is being imported in the South Asia region. India is exporting to Bangladesh and Nepal. Bangladesh, they are exporting about 660 megawatt, whereas to Nepal it is in the range of 150 to 500 megawatt depending on the seasons. Another, and they are India is importing from the Bhutan about 1400 megawatt. In the, if you look at the another 500 megawatt link between India and Bangladesh is expected to be ready by June 2018. So this capacity is going to be doubled just in 5 years period only. Similarly, from Bhutan, two important hydropower stations, Sunchu 1 and 2, which are going to add capacity of 2200 megawatt. So today the capacity is 2300. In 1920, this capacity is going to be doubled. And sorry, on the right side, I have just shown that the Niti Aayog, the Planning Commission India, they have shown in their planning that they will be importing and exporting to the neighboring countries. So just I wanted to show that only, and they have done some sensitive analysis also. In the lease report, by 2047, it will be 10,000 megawatt they will be importing, and 60,000 megawatt in the post-Hurricane effort only. I think our session is that only that we should have energy cooperation through synergies only, success synergies only. So that is why let me share with you what are the existing power trade and what are the benefits to India and Bangladesh both. The trade between power trade between India and Bangladesh started in 2013. Since then, the load shedding, if you look at that, in 2009-10, it was 1459 megawatt, and it has now reduced to 37 megawatt in 2014-15 only. So drastically, the load shedding in Bangladesh has been reduced. The average cost of power purchase cost in Bangladesh, based on all the rental plants, DPDP and IPP, it is 6.27 taka per kWh. And they are importing from India, the average cost is about 5.62. So about 65 paisa, they are saving from importing from India only. Mr. Arvind Shahi, the ex-secretary of India, they have done some study also, and they have come out that $500 billion per year is the benefit to Bangladesh. But at the same time, India is also benefited because India also benefits from the optimization of their generation assets and also earning export revenues. So it's a win-win situation for both the countries. Benefits between India and Bhutan also. Since 2003, the hydropower development in Bhutan has immensely helped Bhutan also. Their If you look at the hydropower has helped to contribute about 40% to Bhutan's revenue and 25% of GDP. So again, there's a win-win situation for that also. And moreover, this electricity has also created surplus capacity, has created cement plant, iron industry, steel industry also. Benefits of India power trade also. If you look at that, in 1971, the power exchange between India and Nepal was started about 47 years back. And currently it is in the range of 150 to 500 megawatt. And it has also helped in Nepal to reduce the load shedding and purchasing power cost also. But basically, Nepal has the export potential. I think once they are going to come up, they will be also importing to India. Recently, I think we have done a study on economic benefits of the power trade between India and Nepal also. And we have done with accelerated power trade scenarios, we have done some different scenarios. And if they accelerate their power generation, then Nepal will be benefited and their GDP could reach 13,000 billion in 2045. If you look at the international experience also, the aspiration behind is definitely to have an efficient use of energy sources. If you look at the European power pool, today 28 countries are interconnected. They have got the political differences, but they are all interconnected for the economic growth only. And later we count 6 member countries are connected, South African power pool, Nord pool, Western power pool. So all these successful examples are with us only. Let me share with you the investment scenario. As I think we have been discussing that South Asia is one of the fastest growing regions in the world only, and more than 6% GDP growth. As per the World Bank estimates, US dollar 1.7 billion to US dollar 2.5 trillion investment is required in South Asia. And for only electricity, the requirement is US dollar 603 billion is required. It's a huge investment. I'm quite sure. If you look at the FDI, I just want to say that Bangladesh in percentage wise was having in the period of 2010 to 15 highest FDI inflow, but in absolute terms India has the highest this only. But the overall FDI contribution to GDP is well below 2% for all the countries at all. What are the key risks associated with investments? I think we can broadly categorize in 4 categories: political and country stability, policy and regulatory issues, and project developments and commercial risks. And we have got the risks, and parallelly we have got the mitigations for political uncertainties also. MIGA is there, investment agreements also there only. But I think this is, in these 4 areas, having a standard contracts, payment security mechanisms, on policies on the land acquisitions, these are all important because it is a long gestation and lot of risks are associated with the power sector. We have developed some guidelines. I think time is not there, so simply I can say that our study has suggested that why not to create some regional cross-border electricity trade investment facilitation forum. SAARC CCI is already playing that role only. I think they can play more focused approach on this so that they can facilitate investment in the sector only. They can promote, another thing is policy, regulatory and market instruments. You can go through our, I think this soft copy also because time is not there. But all these regulations also plays an important policy relating to the political risks also. We need to fast track, we need to create a single window clearance also. So these, some of the, I think, suggested guidelines which we have come out in this report only, that can be seen. I think I can skip. Sorry, I simply say that we have been doing the last 5 years, though this was initiated in 2000. So in the last 5 years we have been working in South Asia region to promote, and we have come out with various guidelines also. The time is not there, I think. So these are number of reports today. I have displayed that reports also. So just for thought for discussions, bilateral and regional approach, I think, which we have been discussing also. How to accelerate the development of hydropower? We have been talking that. What are the innovative market instruments, financing mechanisms for mobilizing investments? Role of government. I think the government also needs to play for that role. Role of private sector. Because government alone cannot fund for such a large investment in the hydropower sector only. So the role of private sector is very, very important. Need of institutional mechanism for promoting the regulatory harmonization investment mechanism. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So you're saying, both the hard copy and the soft copy is available, and so this is a very thorough, look at how digital cooperation in energy, will look like, but also with some guidelines. So this is, very important, and we should really thank the team that has prepared the report. So, all those interested should go through the report. Now, let's go to the panel, and so, instead of saying constantly we're out of time, I think, we have this wonderful, panel where I want to really, engage them in asking. We can start with Wangji. So the question, I guess, is we are saying it is not a question of could be, it has to be, it must be. So given what is existing versus what we need to do as a business conclave to move this agenda ahead. So can you give us your thoughts on how we might actually move ahead, but given what we actually have right now?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, fellow panelists, excellencies, business leaders, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to participate in this panel discussion. I'm from Bhutan, and we have, in fact, a small power system, but fortunately or unfortunately, we are the largest clear net exporter, I think, of the total 2,313 megawatts being traded. We account for about 1,400 of that. So that is the situation. Now, I must say that in terms of regional integration, energy, electricity, I think it's a must. And the studies that have done, several studies, you just heard a presentation by Sari on energy integration. There are studies done by SAARC, there are studies done by SAARC themselves, by Beam State, all point out to, one, there is energy deficit, and there is again a reliance on single energy sources, different countries. India is largely thermal, Bhutan, Nepal, and maybe Sri Lanka, we have hydro, Bangladesh is gas, so there is adequate room. And then against this backdrop, the countries in the last few years have been growing at 7-8%, and there's aspiration for greater growth. In fact, India is talking about double-digit. Bhutan is also talking about that. And for that, energy is a vital ingredient. And if you don't have it, and if you don't use that, especially with the renewables, intermittent renewals, hydro must be promoted. And I think this integration in optimizing these diverse resources, energy sources for energy security, I think is a must.
Very good. So can I just, ask you one more thing about, the zero carbon, Bhutan, and so the trend, that sets. But also you're talking about technology and how we need to adopt, better technology. Could you enlighten us a little bit?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bhutan, luckily, again, we produce clean energy. And in terms of the emissions, Bhutan is carbon neutral. We leave the least carbon footprint. Now the qualification again for energy requirement of the region is that it must be clean. And the clean, as of now, is coming, the renewals are taking, I think, are growing in a large way. But then the problem is that how do we balance that? And for that you need, hydro is the only possible answer, because you cannot go back to, again, thermal, because you need to reduce the, rather in terms of the environmental considerations, that it will be a necessity. Sure. Now, in terms of also in cooperation, I believe that so far we've been blaming it on technical. Electricity is a regulated market, and from Bhutan's perspective, simple, we would like electricity to be treated just like another commodity. Don't do political masters, everybody, don't do anything, just treat it as any other commodity and let the business take over. And on the technicalities, I believe that we had some discussions. These can always be handled. They are smart grids. in terms of technology has reached so far that, in fact, people are talking about the third industrial revolution. Third industrial revolution is going to be about energy, and it's going to be about the info highway. How you can even energy will go through that. So sure, this is how it's going to be.
Very good, thank you. So thank you very much. And so it sets the good tone. And so can we hand it over, to Tamimji? So the point about Bangladesh's experience, and then how we can get to must be.
Thank you. I believe that the carbon footprint we are talking about, just a comment on that, is going to vary from country to country, but because the resources are different, we'll try to optimize and have minimum carbon footprint, but like what Bhutan has as a resource, we don't have that. So, we have to probably depend a little bit on hydrocarbon and other sources. India until 2003, I just had learned from my friend, had about 100 gigawatt of power since 1947 of this independence. And once their policy was liberalized and enabling environment was created, in the last 15 years, they have added 225 gigawatt. So, conducive policy and liberalized policy is very important. That has to be there, and in all countries, in a synchronized manner, we have to believe that it will be beneficial for us, and only then this kind of growth will take place. And it is an example in India that it has happened. It took 23 years of talking between India and Bangladesh for energy trade to take place. The first initiation happened long time back, and then we kept on going to and fro. There was a huge mistrust, basically, political mistrust between the countries, that whether we could actually trade electricity and live with it politically for the countries. But finally, in 2013, the final stage took place, and then it took about a couple of years to do the physical facilities. And since 2015, we are importing 500 megawatt. Now it is 600. This year is going to be about 1200 megawatt, and I believe in next 5 to 10 years is going to be about 8 to 9,000 megawatt. That is going to be traded. So things happen when you decide and you take an action on it. But it takes time for us to decide, because we have to get rid of our doubts, and we have to take small steps, which need courage, and that will happen. I believe that will happen. Another example of happening, as you say, good, or I'm giving you examples of happening. The Indian cross-border power trade policy was corrected recently, just a couple of months back, which basically lifted the barrier for regional trade, because that policy was, there was a clause that was actually detrimental for three-party trade or non-Indian entity going through India, that kind of barrier was there. But then the policy was, I think it was in 2015 they had this policy, and corrections will happen. And the desire of the people and the government will be reflected in the policy. You start with something and then you change and you go ahead. So that is what has happened. Now challenges. So I will not say a single word about the benefit of regional cooperation. It has been told again and again, and it has been well established. There is no point, going on there. How to do it? What are the challenges? Of course, number one is political wish, and we have to get rid of the mistrust. That is the number one thing. And there is always people within the country, they have ulterior motives of interest. They try to dislodge this regional cooperation because it helps them. This is the business people within the country. In India, in Bangladesh, in Pakistan, everywhere, that group is there. So we have to be aware of that. And political wish has to be established. And then, of course, regulations, we have talked about it. The commercial framework of business is very important. Without commercial success, and this is commercially viable, nothing will work. We are buying power from India on the basis of bidding. no bilateral, open market bidding. Indian companies, traders, they're coming and bidding, and whatever is the competitive price, we are purchasing on that. So that is the framework. That has to be like that. So I am very hopeful that we'll have, and I tell you, the progress will happen rapidly. It will happen rapidly. The initial barriers have been overcome, and I hope within next 5-10 years, within even 5 years, there will be much more trade, energy trade, electricity trade, and other kind of energy-related trade that will happen in this region.
Very good.
Thank you.
So can I just ask you a little bit about the price parity that we mentioned? So prices are set in different frameworks across the region, and so just a little more elaboration on how we might actually approach that.
Just I'll give you an example of Bangladesh. Bangladesh still charges only $1 per 1,000 cubic feet, $1 per unit of gas for its electricity production, which produces about 65% of our electricity is produced from gas still today, and it is only 3 cents a kilowatt hour. Now we are purchasing at 6-7 cents from India, and the cost of production from liquid-based power is even much higher, 15-20 cents, even closer to 20 cents. So in a regional, so there is an internal adjustment within Bangladesh. If we increase the gas price from $1 to $2, the production of electricity cost will go up to almost double. From 3 cents, it will go up to 25 cents. Not double, but 5 cents. So how do we adjust? It is an internal challenge, an economic challenge within the country. So before the regional parity of price comes in, a lot of countries will have to do economic adjustment within their own country, and that is a big challenge.
Very good. Thank you. So let's go to Dipakji. Sir. So the PTC, of course, is a key player, and so this morning also we heard the location, the size of India, so all of these issues. But I think the optimism that we can bank on is basically a lot of bilateral grids are already in place, and so whether we like it or not, ultimately they will evolve into regional grids as well. So this is one issue, but the other was you were mentioning about technology, but also how we need to be careful about redundancy of technology. So the urgency, the speed at which we need to tackle these issues, it's not like we have the luxury of waiting another 22 years. So what are your thoughts on how we might actually integrate this market?
Thank you.
It worked.
See, we have everything, right, from the ambassador, US ambassador, she took out most of the points. The presentation has given most of the points, and whatever I left behind has been dealt with my colleagues from Bhutan and Bangladesh. What we see in India, when we started doing a trading market in 2000, 2001, that was the beginning of this century, apprehensions were there, but as you have to be persistent, and if it makes economic sense, and if it is going to be beneficial for the buyers, then obviously things happen, and that's the reason 100,000 megawatt becoming 340, and we are going to be 500 plus by 2030 or so. Now, how this has been possible? See, one thing is there which we have to now start openly talking about is the latent demand in the region, which I saw the mention of load shedding. If we do a calculation of all the load shedding done by all the suppliers of electricity in these 8 countries, or let's say Maldives and Sri Lanka, they are slightly not connected, but if you see that, then you will know what is the latent demand. And latent demand is leading to this concept of having 650 kilowatt hour annual average consumption vis-a-vis 3000 kilowatt hour average consumption of the world. So this gap this gap will keep reducing with the help of technology, the financing. See what is happening if you have an approach, funnel approach. Resources are insufficient. All these countries are mostly dependent upon hydrocarbon, where the price increase decreases, a suddenness of a spurt which comes. I mean, you see for 2 years $50, and suddenly it goes to $70, $80, the oil, etc. So we don't have so much in our region. What we have is coal, hydropower, enough of solar, wind, etc. and biomass also. So shift has to be done from these resources to the natural resources which are present. But we have to also remember, with renewable increasing, and we have the challenges of European market which we have seen, that when wind and solar comes in a big way at a given point of time, and there are many times we have to pay, the generating company have to pay to the utility to buy the power. So the reverse also, which has not been seen in this country or this region, which we will be seeing in next 5 to 10 years time. And thirdly, with so much of things, the storage, the Teslas or the Japan, every country is trying to bring out gigawatt storage, which is going to take time and for them to become economically viable, to be adopted by the masses. But that is not something which is now in a distant dream. No more in science fiction movies. These are realities. It may take 10 years, it may take 15 years. And we are very rich in hydropower, Nepal as a country. But you have to also realize it takes you 10 years to construct the power plants. So we have to expedite the things. Hydro is very much required for balancing of renewable. Thermal, there is an improvement. Earlier thermal plants couldn't ramp up, ramp down. Now with the new technology, we can ramp up from 55% PLF to 90% PLF. Unlike the gas, which can from 90% it can go to zero. But there is no gas in this region, and let's accept it. So we have to have those products. And if you see, the beauty of this region is not only in the resources, the complementary of the demands, the variations of the demand and supply are also there, which is a natural thing, which is, we are very lucky as a region. I'll give an example. Nepal and Bhutan, they require power in the dry season. Like in India, we have Himachal and Jammu Kashmir. And in summer seasons, when the maximum hydro is being generated, they don't require that much of hydro. So, other than traditional, the contracts, long-term, medium-term and short-term contract, and we have to now thinking about moving from the 30-35 years contract. In India, we started saying 5 years back, and now last 4-5 years, we have not seen any state coming with a long-term contract other than renewable because it's the beginning of the cycle. So all those changes, the duration of contract, because financing, etc., will follow when these things are stabilized. The inter-regional connectivity, the demand centers connectivity. So Nepal can, in the winter season, instead of buying power, they can sell their hydro potential if they utilize it, generate quickly, sell it this much in their wet season, and equivalent amount of energy, depending on the price. It can be, suppose they have given 1 unit, so they can get 1.01 or 0.99, depending upon the market condition. So we have to introduce the market concepts also, which we have done in India. The 10% of the total generation of about 1300 billion kilowatt hour, about 10 to 11% is coming through short-term market, and which we believe that should go to 20-25%. Similarly, in the region also, we have to create products. The exchanges we are operating, it has to move beyond the contours, day-ahead market, short-term market, bilateral market. And when I say bilateral market, the multilateral rides on bilateral. Just to give an example, suppose the policy makers and regulators are behind the curve, let's say, and the business is ahead of the curve. Instead of just keep pushing on the why bilateral, we can always think about, let's say, I'm not saying PTC, as any trading company, a US-based trading company can also come and set up, because it's 100%, it's allowed, FDI 100% is allowed in India. You set up the trading companies, let them buy from Bhutan or Nepal, and then keep selling to Bangladesh or to Myanmar or to Pakistan as and when it opens up. So we have to be, the business has to be ahead the curve, the policy makers will have to follow, the regulations will have to follow.
Sure.
That's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
This is very important because I think, on the panel, we do have people who understand the challenges, who've worked hard on these sectors for 22 decades, 3 decades. And so the reality is that, the timing or the conversation at this conclave, should be that of we can do it. It is possible, and so here are the people who can actually help us, to actually do it. So on that note, Michael, we're discussing that the engineers should take a step back and let economics, do its thing. So do you want to elaborate a little bit on that, your thoughts?
Sure, I'd be happy to.
First of all, let me just start by saying thank you very much for having me. And a little bit of clarity, I'm really not the director of USAID, as it says in the schedule, but the director of the Office of Clean Energy and Environment at USAID in India. There's also a very vibrant mission of USAID under Ambassador Tiblitz's guys here in Nepal. And we all work together and collaborate. What we do out of Delhi is manage a program that's been referred to several times, the South Asia Regional Initiative for Energy Integration, or SAARC. It's very, very, very good to be here today, and thank you so much for moderating this and the guests. So much of what I had hoped to say, or thought I should say, of course, has been covered by my colleagues here on stage, and they are really the learned people in this sector. But I'd like to kind of step back just a little bit and address the issues from a different angle, because I know in the room today we have very esteemed guests from the SAARC Business Leaders community from all over the region. And I'm sure that while the technical issues are interesting and the sort of drilling down into the deep detail on energy transmission and trade is also, what does it mean for the business community? How does it actually make your business opportunity more potentially fruitful, easier, transaction costs are less, and so on? And I'd like to step back and have us ask a question. We use this phrase, this term quite a bit recently, and I think going into the future you'll hear more and more about it. We talk about energy security. I was actually just Googling the term to find out really if there was a technical definition. And what I found out was there are hundreds of technical definitions. And it really depends on where you're looking at this from. If you're a member of government, you certainly think about how your natural resource base can accommodate the demand for energy in a stable, reliable manner into the future. We talk about sustainability. If you're military associated with your government, you think of it in a very different light. But if you're a private sector, when it really comes down to the bottom line, you think about the bottom line. How is the availability, the reliability, and the cost of energy going to affect my business? Going to make it so that I can get up every morning, go into the office or into the manufacturing laboratory and produce the goods and the services that I have decided to invest my life in, and making sure that the cost of that is effective, so at the end of the day you generate a profit, so that you can create jobs, so that you can provide economic opportunity for your family, for your community, and for your nation, and for your region. Why is therefore when we talk about energy security, why is the issue of regional economic integration and energy integration so important in that? I think this comes down to the issue that I was raising earlier. While the engineers and the people that help us develop the systems for transferring energy, for first generating that energy and then transmitting that energy and distributing that energy and eventually bringing it into your house or into your commercial enterprise for your consumption of energy, why is the integration of the region so important? Well, some of the studies that we've been able to do at SAARC through USAID and the American government have really focused in on the benefits to trade, or the cost to trade, the cost and the liabilities to trade across border. And a couple of my colleagues up here have raised this issue that in fact, we've done a few of the pilots, or we've started off on this bilateral trade endeavor to get a feel for what it looks like and how it works and how it eventually brings energy back to you, the consumer or the business person, the entrepreneur who's already invested in companies or is looking to make investments in companies. Is energy a key input to your operation? Without having the opportunity to talk to each one of you individually, I can only assume that it is one of the key ingredients to your efficient operation. And the cheaper that energy is, the more efficient and the more profitable your company and your enterprise becomes. Can it go down to zero? No, it can't. All commodities have a cost, and you know as a business person, I don't need to tell you that every piece, every ingredient, every material you use to generate your service or your product has a cost associated with it. It may be human resource cost, it may be material cost, it may be time cost, and it certainly is energy cost. So the economics of energy provision and consumption are going to be paramount. But how does the regional integration around energy then speak to that issue? Well, we've seen from many of the studies we've conducted and from much of the discussion by esteemed members of the energy discussion community that we have up here on the panel today, and many others, of which I am really pleased to be an observer. We've seen that very few countries in the world can actually achieve energy security on their own. It's almost impossible. As we see today, very few countries in the world can achieve food security on their own. Because we're a much smaller, integrated, global economy today than we ever have been. Some of that is because we can all travel much easier. Some of it is because communications is much easier. But a lot of it is because business leaders like yourself have decided that they want to look outside their normal or traditional boundaries and understand the marketplace outside their communities, outside their regions, and outside their countries. And then that brings us to an understanding of, are there benefits to be had by looking outside? Or will it cost me more? You're making those choices every single day. Are you going to benefit? Are you going to profit more by looking outside? And I believe collectively, the answer has been a resounding absolutely. In the United States, we've been an advocate for increasing trade opportunities, not just for us because they're important to our markets, but we also understand they're important to the global trading market, that everybody gains. Do we gain on every commodity and every country at every time? No, of course not. Some countries hold a comparative advantage in certain commodities at certain times, whether it's seasonal or throughout certain periods in certain regions. But we all make those choices. We go to the marketplace and we demand from it what we need, and we give back to it what we have. And you here in this region, in this gathering specifically, have been brilliant about doing that thus far. But in the area of integrated regional energy cooperation, the opportunities continue. And they are robust. And there is an opportunity for you to build your economic strength and your stability and the prosperity of this region, which is really the fundamental commitment of the United States. The prosperity and stability of integrated South Asia. You can do that by looking at the basic inputs to your production. And one of the most basic inputs to your production, probably after the traditional economic ingredients of land and human capital, is energy. And that energy will become cheaper, it'll become more efficiently traded, it'll become more effective in your own production scheme by looking at the countries all over the South Asia region and understanding what their comparative advantages are and fully exploiting those. I'm not going to throw the numbers and the data at you because I think it's been really well presented by my colleagues up here on the panel in an incredible way, and I look to these folks as my coaches and mentors for the information that we so vitally need to make decisions. But let me just talk about one last thing. If we all agree that the trade and energy is good for everybody, we need to socialize this in our communities, because not everybody's convinced. There are people who actually believe that in a region like this, that it's an opportunity to be exploited by others. Everybody's going to trade and maximize their benefits, and all countries should make decisions based on that economic principle. But everybody understands also that maximizing trade can bring about the economic benefits for all actors, including the private sector. And dialogue with your government must be in some part facilitated by the private sector. You are an important interlocutor and a participant in this discussion on regional energy integration. There are 3 areas where we think, through the SAARC program, are very important in achieving the maximum capacity, the potential of that energy trade and integration. One is to make sure that, in fact, we have the right regulatory and monetary or financial framework in place. Are you, as a potential investor in the energy sector, looking at the landscape and identifying that this is something that can maximize my benefits, reduce my risks, and optimize my cost? Can you make those choices? And if you say yes, we're good, but we're not there yet. And one of the things we're working on is how do we work with the governments and civil society in understanding that regulatory framework and how to improve it and make it better. And we're on that way. The second thing is the technical part, which my colleagues have talked to, and I won't go into detail. The third thing is really the market structure itself. And USAID, with other enterprises in the United States government, other agencies, including the Department of State, the Department of Commerce, our laboratories at the Department of Energy, have worked hard on understanding what the regional energy market can be and what it should be and what it can be, how we can work towards that. And we are very happy to announce in probably the next year or so that a regional energy trading marketplace will be established with all governments participating and all private sectors participating. And we believe it will really help to increase the availability of trade in energy, but then stabilize the marketplace across all commodities. And so let me just finish with this last comment. You can't always go to the marketplace and look to buy your energy options from a variety of sources, you and the private sector. It's not like other commodities where you can choose to buy your lumber, certain vendors, you can choose to buy your salt, you can choose to buy your real estate from a variety of sellers. Energy comes from some very specific sources that we don't always have control over. But what you can do is engage with your government, engage with your private sector, and engage in your business community to understand what it is that helps make a more efficient marketplace for that key ingredient, energy. Private sector-led engagement is going to be a very, very fundamentally important driver to this particular issue. And I encourage all of you to think about that and what it means, reaching out to your governments and your community groups, and working as a driving force within the organization that's represented here today, the SAARC Business Leaders Conference. I'd like to congratulate you for being here, for getting this organized, for putting on a brilliant display of a coordinated effort. And I'd like to think that the business community will lead the social, political, and economic strengthening and revival here in Southeast Asia, because you have a commitment to it that goes to family, community, and to your own nations. And congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So on that note, we need to end this panel, not just because everybody is hungry, I guess, but also, look at the brilliance, of the people up on the dais. And so if a group like the business leaders in South Asia can draw upon the expertise that we already have, I think we can get there, very quickly. So let's give them a big, round. And then I think we have some gifts that we want to give away. So, and then we can end this session as well. So over to
discussing how can we have synergy when it comes to energy cooperation. Thank you for your wonderful insights. And I would like to request our moderator, Mr. Anil Chakrakar, to kindly present our token of appreciation to our panelists. Dr. Sonam B. Wangdi, Professor Dr. Mohammad Tamim, Mr. Deepak Amitabh, Mr. Michael Santon, and Mr. Vijay Kharbanda. So thank you to all these distinguished panelists. I'd also like to invite on stage Mr. Rahman. I would like to request him to kindly come on stage and present our token of appreciation to our moderator, as well as Her Excellency, the U.S. Ambassador to Nepal. To the U.S. Ambassador, thank you so much, ma'am. And also to our moderator, I'd like to request Mr. Rahman to kindly present this to our moderator, Mr. Anil Chakrakar, as well. Thank you so much. Maybe we'll take a group photograph now, concluding the 4th session of the 6th SAARC Business Leaders Conclave, which was on regional integration and energy cooperation, success through synergy. I would like to